The idea of something big or mysterious lurking below the water has always been extremely intriguing to me. That rush of adrenaline I get when I think about a large open body of water like an ocean or a lake creates a feeling that can only be described as a mix of anxiety or fascination. While the thought of something scary floating below me in the water freaks me out to some extent, it also leaves me feeling extremely interested as I really wonder what it is that's floating in the deep dark depths. Now, a lot of what I discuss today is going to touch on topics that I've already talked about in my video about why we are afraid of the dark. So if you find yourself at all interested in what I talk about, then I would super recommend going and giving that video a watch. The fear or phobia of large bodies of water is often referred to as thalassophobia, and while most people don't have an extreme fear of the water, pretty much everybody has at some point experienced that eerie feeling when floating in the deep blue. Now, the vast emptiness of the sea is something that definitely scares people, but the idea of creatures that are unknown lurking below them is also something that is extremely frightening. The concepts that make up thalassophobia are quite obvious and easy to comprehend. It mixes the fear of strange creatures with the fear of not being able to see what's around you, and creates the feeling of being alone in a hostile environment, even if the area around you isn't immediately dangerous. This idea of being afraid of something that you can't see, or rather the lack of being able to see, is something I touched on in my Why Are We Afraid of the Dark video. The same concept of what makes the dark so scary can be applied in this situation when floating above the vast darkness that just goes on and on and on beyond where any human could reasonably explore. The fear of something in the darkness is scary enough on its own, but considering the fact that the darkness we're talking about here is the ocean or a lake, it just increases the fear exponentially. Thinking about what could possibly be lurking below you, even if that thing is just a simple fish, is such a creepy thought that just gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. I'm definitely not the only person who feels this way. There are hundreds of different forms of media that take the same concept of fear and fascination with the ocean into effect. Take practically everything that H.P. Lovecraft has written, for example. The vast majority of what H.P. Lovecraft has written about deals with this same concept of misunderstanding and fearing the ocean and the water. He even goes so far as to label the creatures he writes about as some sort of gods, almost creating them like they're some sort of separate entity from what exists in our plane. Well, to rephrase that, H.P. Lovecraft definitely writes his creatures as existing outside of our plane of existence, but this same idea that the ocean is almost a whole nother world is applied in this concept here. The film Jaws is a good example of depicting the water as an enemy that houses several predators that prey on our fears of the water. The film portrays the ocean as a place that houses several frightening creatures that are seemingly out to get us. It's scary to think about something like a massive shark stalking the beaches, a place that us people go to for fun, waiting to yank us under, never to resurface again. It's very likely that Jaws is responsible for inspiring thalassophobia in hundreds of people as they watch the movie and realize just how scary and hard to understand the water can be. This idea of misunderstanding the water totally depicts the ocean as a whole nother world that we humans just don't understand the rules to. We don't know what to expect from the ocean, and that's what makes it so scary, as even though it's something that's so grounded in reality and it's something that we encounter all the time, it might as well be out of a fantasy to us. A movie that really drives home my point that the ocean and other large bodies of water can really feel like their own secluded little worlds is Life of Pi. In Life of Pi, the ocean is depicted as a completely separate entity from the rest of the world, and even seems somewhat disconnected and lonely. It dips into the fact that the ocean is a strange and unusual place that can be both beautiful and yet insanely eerie as well. Speaking of these movies and how they deal with and touch on the concept of thalassophobia, I also wanted to talk about how these movies themselves can influence the idea of the fear of the water itself. You see, taking the lack of what people understand about the ocean is something that H.P. Lovecraft was hoping to hit when he wrote his stories, and Peter Benchley was hoping to hit when he wrote Jaws, and even Steven Spielberg when he was creating the Jaws movie. It's almost human nature to be wary of the vast ocean. But it's through our consumption of media that led to this fear of something haunting lurking in the water, waiting for us to make the mistake and coming into contact with it. Just think about it. We weren't naturally born with this fear of some kind of human-hungry monster waiting just below our line of sight. It's through our consumption of media that plays into this natural fear of the open ocean and turns it into some kind of nightmare that has enemies and monstrosities waiting to harm us. Thalassophobia can be an extremely intriguing and fun thing to write about, as it gives somebody the rare opportunity to write a creature or monster that is completely unheard of. Due to the lack of knowledge about the ocean, there are almost no rules for what somebody can do to create a creature that lives in that domain. It's a deep, dark, unexplored environment that contains so many creatures with such odd attributes that can be incorporated in writing in so many different ways. There's bioluminescence that can add to the idea of something creepy lurking in the distance, or maybe even something beautiful and wondrous that adds a bit of texture to the otherwise plain environment of the water. There are complex cases of camouflage that can incorporate the idea of not being able to see what's coming that adds to the fear of a monster. This creates something that's impossible to prepare for, as the characters and readers can't even see it coming. Then there's the most awe-striking of them all, which is the sheer size of some of the creatures that live in the ocean. The ocean is home to some of the largest creatures on the planet. Playing into this concept of creating something with incredible size can totally make somebody who already feels small compared to the size of the ocean feel completely insignificant when they're compared to the size of something that's too large to comprehend. To me, tapping into the concept of thalassophobia and utilizing the concept of the vast fear and emptiness of the ocean is such an interesting thing to me, as it takes something so grounded in reality and makes it such a mind-boggling and scary thing to think about. But yeah, that's about all I had to talk about in regards to thalassophobia, so I hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.